Hey everyone, welcome to the daily analysis for November 14th. Today we did get a little bit of that euro strength that we talked about, as a possibility considering it was sitting on a few major levels across the board. So a little bit of a euro pop, but I think overall there's still a lot of bearish potential in it. However, if it breaks out of some key areas, then all of a sudden our sentiment might change quite a bit on it. So a few different pairs I want to show you and give you an example of where I think the euro might be going and what it might be doing. Also, the Australian dollar is a big game changer today, so I want to take a look at the AUD in a few different areas. And then I'm going to show you exactly, you're looking at my euro chart right now, and it looks a little different. I kind of took all the lines off my euro chart and resubmitted them, just looking at the chart in a fresh new way. And I want to show you what I came up with there. I think I might have stumbled upon something that's a little interesting on the euro dollar. So I want to show that to you and explain that to you as well. Before we get into that, of course, we're going to take a look at our news and see what announcements we have going on tomorrow. And then we'll get into the technical analysis. And as far as news announcements go tomorrow, it is a Thursday, so the unemployment claims coming out at 8:30 a.m. is typically the major news that we're looking for, and there's nothing new with that tomorrow because that is going to be the main announcement that I'm paying attention to. But one other thing that's not typical for your every Thursday is that Bernanke is speaking tomorrow. So I want to keep an eye on that as well a little bit later in the afternoon. So pretty much typical Thursday in the morning, but later on things might get a little more interesting with Bernanke speaking. And that's about the major news that there is tomorrow. There's some very early pound news, but other than that, not a lot of non-US dollar stuff going on tomorrow. Alright guys, and then just for the terms, it's our legal obligation to let you know that this is for educational purposes only and that you're not advised to risk your money based on the things that we're telling you. Okay, so if you need to go ahead and pause the video and read through those thoroughly and make sure you have a good understanding of that, please do that because it's important that you understand the actual purpose of this daily analysis and that you don't take it as investment advice because we're not registered or qualified to do that. Alrighty. And if you can go ahead and pause that if you need to, I'm going to go ahead and move into the charts. Okay guys, so I have the euro dollar daily chart up here. And let me move this a little bit to give you the perfect view. I'm going to try to explain exactly what kind of came to my mind as I was looking through this daily chart and drawing some levels here. The first thing to note is that there's a few major horizontal levels. This one here is one that I noted. This one here has been tested several times, and then this one you can see where we're bouncing off right now has some previous tests. It's actually a pretty major level at that 126.8 or 126.9 area. I won't zoom back to show you that, but you can just take my word for it or look back on your own chart. That's also a pretty major horizontal level. Okay, so these are kind of the steps that the euro dollar, at least since it made its peak up here, has have tested. Obviously, this level itself is what pushed it back down. This second level here, it's tested several times, and then this third level is kind of where we're struggling right now. So let me get rid of those horizontal levels. Okay, and then we have our trends. Now, there's one major long-term trend, pretty steep uptrend from around July till a recent break that's been intact. Okay, so this is the major trend line that you consider when you're looking at a current daily chart of the euro dollar. Now, what's interesting about this trend line is that within the contents of it moving up here, it's created a few different things. Right here, when it got up in this area, we had this ascending wedge because there was this horizontal level here and it was coming up into that, and it was kind of forming this ascending wedge where it seemed like euro dollar might actually break out of the top here and make much higher highs. I think that was kind of my expectation after it bounced down, that the second time it was going to go ahead and break to the upside based on that wedge that was forming there. But obviously price held down and was rejected yet again. So rather than forming the ascending wedge and breaking out, we actually formed this little mini wedge right in here that you can see that we actually broke down into rather than breaking up out of. So kind of the opposite effect that I was expecting personally. But nonetheless, it broke down, and then of course you can see that a tail came up and tested this trend line as it remained intact. It didn't remain intact, but it remained, a key level. It was tested again, and there was continuation to the downside there. So then what started to happen after it broke through here, we kind of started generating this very steep downward trend line. Now this trend line has not been tested a lot, only a few bounces off that area, but still certainly enough to consider it a trend line. And so then what happened was we got inside this little shape here, and if you can see, we have this little awkward triangle right here that kind of formed where price was in a no man's land, because what happened was it broke this major trend line, this long-term trend line here, broke down into it, but it didn't break all the way because we still had this major level right underneath of us in this zone here. So when it was in between 129 and 130, the euro dollar was kind of in a no man's land here, and as you can see, it kind of crawled up, tested here, and then all of a sudden, with one major bar, it came from all the way at the top of this trend line here, touching it, to breaking through our major level, and that happened in a single daily bar. And so what I kind of noticed as I was reevaluating this chart was that since this break, was breaking out of no man's land and through a major level, is probably more of a major break than I even realized at the time. And to me, that kind of sets the euro dollar on a bearish level because of the major break that we see here. And you can see that it went down a little bit, came back up, tested that, and is now continuing down to our next level. And this level is not nearly as major as this level where it broke before. So I almost expect now that it's going to go ahead and break this level too, because of the way it hung up here and eventually broke this level. And so my point in all of this is saying that even what I noticed was that even though this trend line here was broken right here, it didn't really register to me that the euro dollar was moving toward the downside until after this key break of our major level right around 128.5. And so because of that break and even the retest and continuation of this downward movement, the euro sentiment now, to me, when you compare it to the dollar, is actually very bearish. Because when you have a trend that holds up for multiple months like that and has a break, a re-break, a retest, continuation, there's a lot more bearish momentum in there than I even realized when I reevaluate this chart. So again, my point in saying all of this is just to let you know that I think that there is a lot of euro bearish potential when you look at what's going on here. Now, because this is such a steep move, we expect that there might be a pullback into this level or consolidation for some time. But if and when the euro dollar breaks this next level, which is pretty much the next major horizontal level before our low of where we started this trend, which is obviously very low, below 122, until this level, all in here, there's not much, resistance and support clusters that are probably going to cause price to struggle a lot. You can see that, on the way up, it was pretty consistent. Didn't struggle much until it got up to these areas here, and then it started moving sideways and all of that. So if and when price does break below our next level here with any kind of authority, I would then begin to expect euro to start coming all the way back down towards our 121 area, and maybe even making a new low as you zoom back and look at the weekly chart. Maybe even making a new low for the new year if this happens in 2013. Breaking the low of the 2012 mark. So I think that's the bearish potential we have in euro. Assuming that nothing major fundamentally changes, but just this technical things that we see here, if they hold intact, I think that there's a lot of euro bearish potential. When you take out your ruler and you talk about this over a few months time, you're talking about 700 pips or so, which in 700 pip swings, especially like on a pair of the euro dollar where it normally swings back and forth pretty consistently, that's a lot of profitable trades, typically in a 700 pip swing. So as a trader, if this happens and what I'm talking about actually lines up and makes sense, then that's going to mean that over the next few months, there's going to be a lot of great entries on the euro dollar. And if you're a trader, you know that it's those entries, it's those great trades at the end of the month that decide whether you're going to be a net profit or not. And so the euro dollar might provide a ton of those good entries if it really does continue to break these levels and continue this bearish swing to the downside. Okay, so I know I just spent about 10 minutes just on one pair talking about the euro dollar, but I just kind of noticed, that there was so much more bearish potential there than I realized before, judging by my old charts that I kind of, kept the same lines on for so long. Sometimes it's good just to reevaluate the chart, erase everything off, and kind of just go after it again. And so that's what I noticed, and I think it's important to note how much bearish potential there really is with the euro dollar, especially when you consider that if you zoom this chart back and you take a look at, say, the weekly chart, which I'll do now, that this thing has a lot of bearish momentum right now on the weekly chart, and we're talking about lows potentially of all the way down to this 21 area, which again, like I said, would be would break the 2012 low if it went down here, in the near future. So, well, technically it would break it if it went down there anytime, but it would break our low as it's heading down. So a lot of potential here, in my opinion. It's just something that I think is worth taking note of, because typically a currency trader is going to trade the euro dollar quite a bit, and so it's always good to have a grasp of what's going on there. All right, guys. So that's my analysis on the euro dollar. I hope that's helpful. I hope you're not bored by just looking at one pair so in depth. But I think sometimes it's good to get a really solid evaluation of a certain currency pair, and again, a lot of times you can base other currency pairs on the euro dollar. For instance, if you're trading the EURAUD, if you're trading the US dollar CAD, a lot of times having a clear vision of what's going on with the euro dollar can shed some light on those other crosses that have either the euro or the dollar in them. Okay, so let's go ahead and move to the pound dollar. We won't take quite as long of a look, but we'll see what's going on with the pound dollar. All right, and so the pound dollar obviously still very, very bearish. We can see that today started up looking like it might be a bounce, but ended up just another strong bearish tail. And what you'll notice about the pound dollar currently is that from this little up move here, if you extend that trend line all the way out, that's about where we're at now. Now that might not have a lot of authority, considering that the main thing during this up move here was that it was approaching this key level, and it already broke through there. So because of that, that might take away from the validity of this trend. But it's it's good to notice nonetheless that that's there. That oftentimes these trend lines from who knows how long ago come right back into play when you least expect it. The other thing to note here is that I mentioned before, that if you draw kind of like from low to low here on the recent lows, excuse me, from the recent lows, that we are getting near where you'd expect this lower low to kind of die out and come back for a retest. So keep an eye in this area, because if you're short on pound, then you're obviously in a great situation, but you don't want to give up a lot of that profit. So just keep note of that. I said yesterday that just don't be jumping on long, but do be careful and be ready for a bounce when a bounce is due. Obviously, this is a very steep drop here, so a bounce could be due, and you don't want to lose profit on that. So again, I don't suggest taking long positions, but I do suggest being ready for that inevitable bounce when price is moving that steeply to the downward direction. Okay, so that's really my only note with the pound there. I think it's too low to be taking more short entries. I certainly don't think that you should be taking long entries. So that's really about all I can say with the pound. Is just if you're short already, great, awesome. Lock in profit, manage it wisely, and do be careful, because sometimes when it's this steep of a drop, when it's ready for a bounce, it bounces just as steeply back to the upside. And of course, you don't want to lose money, if you're holding a great short position. Okay, let's move to the U.S. dollar yen. We haven't looked at that in a few days, and I want to check that out. And so with the USD yen, I just want to draw your attention to the massive bullish candle that we have today. Obviously, with the downward pressure going on for a long period of time in our breakout here, we paid attention to this breakout. Hopefully, a lot of you made a lot of money going long on the US yen. But once it got up here, we had trouble making a much higher high. It broke, it came down, it made a very small higher high, pulled down, and then now is maybe working to make a higher high, but certainly not there yet. So the question is are we just consolidating and eventually going to turn right back down, or is this actually struggling to break and make a much higher step? I think there's a lot of potential for longs here on the USD yen, because the yen to me It's just a pair that has that long-term, that long-term potential in it. For instance, last time we broke to the upside, which I guess was around February, end of January, February, it broke up from 76 all the way up to 84 in a very short period of time. Because when the yen changes like that, it can be a pretty wide move in not that long of a period of time, because oftentimes the yen is staying pretty stable. So when it gives way to a lot of weakness or a lot of strength, it can move a lot without too much notice. So that's why I like to pay attention to the yen with breakouts and things like that, because if the yen's going to move, really you don't want to miss it. One thing you can see here is from this little move here where it it started moving up. It's kind of right on that trend line as it's bouncing now. So that's kind of something to keep in mind too. Whether it's going to break through the top of this little action that we have here, I do not know. I don't have a strong basis on that, but I think that if it does break, maybe has a retest like we talk about and continues, longs are going to be in order for the USD yen, because again these highs are still quite a bit away, and there's a lot of money to be made from 80 to 84 on the USD yen. Okay, so just keep in mind that pay attention to that US dollar. If that US dollar continues to be very strong, obviously that euro dollar will most likely fall, as we talked about earlier, and then that would play an effect on USD yen, as it would probably continue to rise unless for some reason the yen gains even more strength than the dollar. Then you would expect that USD yen to pick up steam and continue to move upward. Okay, so that's what to note on the USD yen. I don't think that I don't think it's ready quite yet, but it's starting to gain some momentum, perhaps to break through the top again above 80.5. And if it does, I'll certainly be interested in taking some long entries on the way up. Okay, let's take a look at the AUD dollar as well. Okay, and obviously, again, I mentioned before that the AUD had an incredible day of weakness today. Whether that is legitimate weakness or just shaking out the people who kind of finally got on board with the AUD strength, that's yet to be seen. But obviously, the AUD dollar especially covered a lot of ground to the downside today. One thing to note is that we have this trend that's forming here. Been moving up pretty consistently, heading towards the major level here, and kind of forming this mini wedge that we talked about in this area. If this breaks to the downside, then all of a sudden, the target isn't up here for longs, the target is down here for shorts, and so that changes things quite a bit if we do get a strong break. Obviously, one thing we might look for is to see if this is a fake out, and if it moves right back into this level after getting some people out of long positions. But if it continues, if it's not a fake out, then your likely target is going to be around 101 here in this zone that I have shown here. So keep an eye on that AUD. If it closes below, which it looks like it certainly will right now, if it closes below there on the daily chart and actually shows some continuation beyond this line, then you might find yourself in a great short situation, perhaps again on a retest back right in, and then continuation to a lower low. That's always a good setup when you have a major level to target, which would be right here in this 101 area. Okay, so the AUD to me has great potential if we see continuation. If we don't see continuation, then it might struggle right along this line. It might break right back up, but I wouldn't suggest a trade unless there's good momentum-filled continuation to the downside. All right, let's check a non-US dollar pair. Let's check the euro pound. Okay, so with the euro pound, obviously there's a lot more levels and things I could point out than just this main trend line, but that's the main thing I'm worried about right now. And the reason is because it appears that the euro pound is building a base here and heading up to go ahead and retest that trend line, which is something we talked about being a high possibility many times, but didn't quite get here. These tails look like they were slowing down, and then we got this tail here, which to me was looking like it might push price back up to test, but we never got that. We never got any continuation on any type of tail bar until recently, where we've now actually had, amazingly, 4 bullish bars in a row on the euro pound. So that's quite a shakeup compared to what's been going on since this momentum break to the downside. We had one simple retest, but then a pretty strong bearish continuation. So now for the first time in a little over a week, we're starting to build a base and actually make a little bit of ground back to the upside on the euro pound. And again, this trend line is kind of the most sensible target for where you'd expect price to go. However, keep in mind that the euro pound has already tested this trend line once, which is right here. So oftentimes after it tests once, it really never gets there again, at least not in the immediate future. So what we might see is actually a slowing down on one of these areas, like in this. Well, that's actually already basically above it. So perhaps in this area, we might get an immediate stop and actually to head right back down before it gets back to that trend line. So I'm not, that's not my prediction on the euro pound, but I just want to make a note that just because it's heading up doesn't mean that this trend line, or in this trend line zone anyway, is not a definite area that price is going to go. There's a high a high probability that it might not ever get to that trend line again before continuing to the downside. And so to me, although there is the first the first bullish momentum in quite a while, I'm not convinced that the euro is beating the pound now, because the main thing that for several months that we were watching was this trend. Okay, the trend is still up, the trend is still up, the trend is still up, but right now we're starting to get to an area where that trend is looking to be pretty much reversed. Now again, it hasn't broken below our technical previous low of this trend, so right now technically the trend is still up, but obviously based on all the bearish momentum here, it's looking a little rough for the euro. So that's just my personal take on the euro pound. I don't know that it's not going up. I don't know that it is going up. I don't have a strong bias on it because of this break. That kind of took me out of my strong bias of going long on the euro pound. So currently I don't really have a bias on the euro pound. I just think that it's one that you got to wait for. If it does come back and test this trend line, then we'll have an idea of if it breaks, okay, go long. If it bounces, okay, go short. But currently, not a lot for me to base anything on, just in my own personal trading. Okay, if you have an opinion on the euro pound and you think it is going back up there, please leave a comment. Please give me some feedback on that, because it's a pair that I'm not really strongly biased on currently. All right, let's check a few other pairs here. Quickly, I just want to point out that the USDCAD, similar to the US yen, had a breakout here and has moved up since. Not exactly the flying momentum straight up in the air, but we pulled back. We had a nice tail bar here, and it's moved up since then. And now it's just slightly edging out the previous high here. So that's something to keep in mind with the USDCAD. If we get a momentum launch off this level, through 101 or whatever area you're watching, then the USDCAD again has very long-term potential, because the next key level is going to be all the way up here at the previous high around 104.5, which is a long way off. So that's another one to keep an eye on. If the US dollar strength does continue, and there's a lot of pairs that the US dollar is looking pretty good against, if that continues, then we're going to have some serious potential, for the USD CAD, along with the USD yen, along with the euro dollar, along with the pound dollar, along with the AUD dollar. But the USD CAD, of course, falls into that category of the US dollar having a major effect on, because it's obviously in that pair. Okay, so if your USD sentiment is right, it's going to provide a lot of good trades across the board on all of those pairs that we just mentioned. And the USD CAD is making a new high. It's coming off a major break of a trend line, and so it has a good area to target, which of course is that previous high around 104.5. And to me, all of that being considered, the USD CAD could provide some pretty great trade opportunities. Okay, let's check the EUROAUD here. Okay, so the EUROAUD, we have a little bit of an interesting situation. The EUROAUD was obviously on an incredible bullish rally here. This was basically from August all the way up toward the end of October. A very, very bullish run where it covered, let me give you a count, about 1,200 pips in that run. So obviously an incredible run for the EUROAUD. That's when the euro was strongest and the AUD was weakest, so this was basically the best pair to get the most bang for your buck on. Well, obviously after it made its peak up here, that run kind of turned over with a pretty strong reversal to the downside. What's interesting is that it was starting to slow down. We expected a bounce here, and we got a very strong bounce today, obviously right here. Obviously bounced very strong, but what's interesting is that it didn't bounce at a key level. We thought, okay, maybe right here we get a strong bounce, for the EUROAUD before it continued. Maybe at the 50 level here, we get a strong bounce before it continued. But instead, it kind of happened right in the middle here. Not an area where you'd expect a really strong bounce to come from. Now, you could say, oh, maybe that's just news or whatever. What I see here is maybe this is a short squeeze, because after this run, a lot of people are probably saying, wow, man, that AUD is really strong, and that's the place to be long. So, EUROAUD shorts, AUD dollar longs, whatever it was, people were probably jumping on the AUD long. And, after a break of the 50, everyone's saying, oh, it's definitely coming down to at least 61.8, which is pretty much what I was saying. And then you get a crushing bounce that covers, the past 5 days of bearish bars are covered in one bullish bar today. So, to me, more than anything, this EUROAUD, bullish, massive monster day is just an opportunity to short more than anything, in my opinion. I think, it might continue all the way up to the 38.2. I'd be surprised if it did, but it could. But then if it turns back down, okay, then we're looking for shorts again. And of course, the key thing to do when you're looking for these entries is to get in before other people get in, but not get in, too early where you're just jumping on a fake out and it's just going to crush you. So, for instance, like as EUROAUD started heading down here, originally there was people who are getting in up here, maybe even up here. But the people who got in down here and down here are the ones who probably got crushed today. So they just waited too long for that to happen before getting in, and you don't want to do that. So if it heads up here and starts moving down, then you might want to get in the first leg here as it starts moving down. I think that's kind of a critical, fundamental thing about trading, is that you have to get in, at a good enough price that you give yourself a lot of profit potential, but obviously not just jumping in just because it's moving up and it's at a high price where it could just continue to rumble right over you and cost you all your money. Okay, so that balance is really critical, and I think in the EUROAUD we will have a short potential here, assuming that this trend or this reversal, I guess, is going to continue and eclipse all the way down to these lower lows, which I think is a pretty high probability assumption based on the long term of this, is that we're going to head all the way back down toward the 116, even 115 area. And so it's just a matter of getting in at the right place to take advantage of that. And I think that there'll be a good opportunity to do that pretty soon here, especially if this bounces right off the 38 and shows strong continuation. I'll be looking to get in here or here or here or here based on that. And so that's something to keep an eye on there. To me, the AUD, I think has some pretty long-term strength capability. And I'd be surprised if this just reversed all the way back up and started, moving toward the previous high. Well, that's a bad line. The previous high up here. That would surprise me, to be honest. I'm not saying it's not possible or that it won't happen, of course. You can't really say that when you're talking about trading. But I would be surprised if this AUD weakness really held up. And that's just my personal opinion on it. Okay, let's end with the pound New Zealand. I want to check the pound New Zealand. It's a pair that we haven't looked at in a while. And we'll end with that one today. And what I just want to quickly point out here is that on the pound New Zealand, we have this kind of triangle wedge forming. Recently, we had what appeared to be a fake breakout to the bottom because price bounced right back in, as you can see. And so right now, we're bouncing right off the level, hopping right back up towards the top. And if this continues to tighten up all the way to the end here, we might get a pretty nice breakout on the pound New Zealand. Because again, the pound New Zealand is just a pair that runs at an incredible number of pips. I mean, it covers 1,000 pips in an incredibly short amount of time. So, look for this to continue. If it tightens up and eventually bounces out, and you can get on the pound New Zealand, for instance, if you can take a breakout here and have an 80 pip stop loss and target here, which is going to be 500, 600 pip target, then that's obviously a great trade to be in. So a good opportunity to look to take advantage of the pound New Zealand, if that continues. And obviously, who knows? I mean, it might break out right now. It might turn around and break out of the bottom. But if it continues to tighten up and tighten up, those are oftentimes where the best breakouts come from. And so I just want to draw your attention to that on the pound New Zealand. We haven't looked at the pound New Zealand a ton lately because of this wedge, because it's just been very consolidated and has not been moving in big runs. Like if I scroll back here, you can see a run like this, which covers multiple thousands of pips, is what we typically like to see in the pound New Zealand. But lately it hasn't done that, so that's we haven't looked at it as much. but you never know, it might break out and begin to do that any time here, and this would pretty much be a golden opportunity for it to do that based on the wedge right in front of us. Alright, so that's about it for the daily analysis today, guys. I hope that the information today was valuable. I know that it was a little less technical at the beginning and just kind of theoretical, so to speak, based on the euro. But I hope that you got some value from that. And again, I'd love to get your feedback in the comments and such based below. Alright, guys, thanks again, and I will talk to you real soon.